Hi guys, if you're new here, I'm Melissa, and today we're going to go over my 2025 Wrapped. So grab a warm beverage, your coffee, your tea, and we are going to go straight into my writing stats of 2025. So in 2025, I started my channel here, but I was excited about a project that I have been kind of talking one's ear off about, which is Project Mushroom. I started writing that in January. I finished a very rough draft of it around July, took August off to move apartments, and came back to writing in September with a new project idea called Project Apple. Wrote 30,000 words or thereabout of that. And then in late December, by late I literally mean, I think it was like December 20th, I started outlining something, wrote just about 2,000 words in that project, and I'll talk about that kind of a little bit later in the video where I have a bit of a philosophy for 2026. Going into my stats for the year, I wrote just about 105,000 words. Looking at this graph that'll be here, we can see that May was my largest writing month. Just kind of going through the timeline here, January was not a big month for me. I wasn't really taking writing seriously. I had just come up with this idea for Project Mushroom, but I was also planning my wedding for later that month. I got married on January 25th, so there was not a lot of time for writing. I think that shows as well because I had about 3,000 words in January. 6% of my writing went on in February, which is double what January was. I had more time after the wedding to relax, write thank you cards, and also write a bit on the side. I think by now in February, I was really getting into the book. So I had around here like 5,000 or 6,000 words. I was really getting into it. I was really liking it. I was making mood boards, and I was just kind of identifying the main themes of the book. I had, my pitch of a witch and apothecary owner fall in love, go on an adventure together, very D&D style, cozy fantasy. And from here on out, I think I just kind of really just ran with it. I'm not really sure why March is so big. Anticipate it being a reasoning of I didn't have to plan for the wedding, the thank you cards were done, the honeymoon was booked and planned, so I didn't have to worry about that. And I think just maybe the story was really just taking me at that point. There was some traveling going on here. I think I went to a conference, but maybe the conference and traveling on the plane made me write more. I can't quite remember. April is a whopping 4%. I was gone for just under 2 weeks traveling the UK and Ireland. I was clearly very inspired by the honeymoon trip. I wrote my largest amount of words in May. In May, I wrote a little bit over 20,000 words. My biggest writing day out of the entire year was May 17th. I don't know what was happening that day, I'll be honest. I think it was like, I had something like 5,000 words written that day. Couldn't tell you what was happening that day, but that was a day I was writing. In June, we were apartment hunting because our lease was ending. We also went to Las Vegas for another conference I was at. So June was a little bit of a lighter month. There's a lot of more components going on here. My writing went back up again in July. So we had 4th of July, we had my birthday. I was either on Discord with college friends writing, or I was writing with an in-person group. This is when I had finished Project Mushroom. I had finished the rough draft of it, and the intention was to go take August off and then to go back in with fresh eyes in September. As you can see, August was literally nothing. I wrote 2% of my word count here. I wrote 2,369 words in August. A large portion of this month is made up of moving vlog that I never actually showed anyone. I think every day after work, I was filling up my car, moving to this apartment, unpacking, going back, doing it again until it got dark out. Physically, I was exhausted in August. Most of the entire month was dedicated to moving our old apartment and moving into this apartment. Totally worth it though. At the end, we've been here now for a couple months and it is just so vastly improved from our old living situation. But needless to say, not a lot of writing got done. I wrote a little bit of Project Apple here, what would have accumulated to like 2,000 or so words. So yeah, I did not write a lot in August. Because of the move, looking at September, very clearly the move was done. We were unpacking here still, but that's when I rededicated myself to writing. And September was a larger month. September was not my biggest month, but it was a month of a lot of dedicated writing. So I had 10,600 words here. And at this point I was still writing Project Apple. I had put Project Mushroom in I don't want to say I put it away, because I have complete intentions to come back to it. But at that point in time, it was, fall, it was autumnal. I was ready to write this cozy, witchy story about my family's apple orchard. And it was perfect timing because my mom was ready to go to apple orchards, and that it just kind of feels like a very fall book. That was one of the reasons why I had such a high word count here, was because everything was just flowing. It was drafting stage, it was rough, it was me coming up with this world and the character and what she's doing. So I find that that really flows easily, and you can see that in the word count. Like, I very clearly was kind of in a groove. I believe September is also my writing retreat, and September also I was interviewing at a new place, which ultimately became my job. So a lot of writing, a lot of things on the side, but all came together in a great element of the year. And then we're into October, so I started my new job officially, and I'm working on Project Apple, really just kind of getting deep into the the middle of the act, I believe. I'll have a breakdown of how many words I wrote this year. You'll see that technically in word count, Project Apple and Project Mushroom are very close in terms of word count, but I am nowhere near as far along in the story as Project Apple as I am with Project Mushroom at that word count. I think I'm trying to be cognizant of the fact that I am an underwriter. Project Mushroom is very much underwritten. There's a lot of brackets, a lot of space that needs to be filled in. And Project Apple, I was being very diligent to try to make a clean rough draft. And there's also a dual timeline, which does add word count too, and adds bulk in the book. So while they are similar, they're about 10,000 words apart from each other, they're vastly different in terms of where I am in the storyline. And then, no surprise, in November, it was a big month. I did participate in NaNoWriMo Write Your Novel November. I had some sort of writing vlog that I was creating, and then halfway through I realized how difficult it was to get the words down on the page, and a lot of it is just me struggling, so I don't know if it's worth even putting a 2-week vlog together of me just struggling. Who knows? If that's the kind of content you guys want to see, like, let me know. I have it. Essentially, it was me struggling with Project Apple, and I find that in my writing career, if I hit around that 30,000 mark is where I kind of feel a little shaky in terms of like where the story's going, or like I hit some sort of internal block. I decided that in November, those first 2 weeks were a little shaky. I was not like having a fantastic time with writing, because I was just, putting a lot of stress on myself to make it work. And in order to, not make myself stressed out by forcing myself to continue writing, I took off some pressure and decided, it's okay if this is not the month for me to write this book. Well, that was the case. I did end up writing 14,000 words. So I took the rest of the month off. I think normally for my writing, I tend to write on the weekends, and so writing every single day after having, had 5 days off, 2 days on for writing, that really was a switch that I don't think I was ready for. I tried to write a little bit of Project Apple in December just to see how I was feeling. I didn't get around the block that I was having, but I did write a little bit more just to kind of understand where the story was going, and I left myself in a good spot where I can pick it up at any point. And in December, I did end up outlining a project pretty late in the game, I would say, and that was Project Inquisitor. I think I might have talked about this a little bit here and there. If not, I need to practice my pitch a little bit. Project Inquisitor is a dark fantasy. It is the sacred space between and Shadow and Bone. It centers on themes of religious trauma, dismantling a patriarchal theocracy, and what we sacrifice in order to achieve what we think is morally right. This is actually a idea that I wrote way back in high school. It was a very different iteration at that point. It was YA, it was set in the real world, it was set in New Orleans, and then it evolved when I was in college into an adult fantasy with like steampunk roots. And now I'm kind of quantifying it as it's a second world. It is dark fantasy. This is a story that I've been, kind of waiting, like I've been writing different iterations of it since 2014. And it now feels like a good time to kind of write it and kind of revamp it. So I did a 11 chapter outline because I'm finding that after, this whole year, I'm finding that the outlines really help me kind of keep my ideas in order and hopefully don't make that wall that I reach at 30,000 words become a reality. If there's one thing I've learned is that I need an outline. This year I wrote Project Mushroom with an outline, and then Project Apple was kind of like very loosey-goosey. That did not work out. And then Project Inquisitor has an outline that seems to help, especially because this book has had other iterations before. Those echoes of the other iterations are kind of like living in my head still, and I've got to let them go and like remind myself that that's not the current iteration. And by having that outline, it keeps me on that track. So some interesting stats about my 2025 writing is that most of my writing occurred on Saturdays, which like I kind of expected that to happen. I tend to write Saturday mornings. That might change a little bit in 2026. Looking at the breakdown here, at the smallest section, Project Inquisitor, I only wrote 2,100 words. Not a surprise, this is a new project. I literally started writing it after I did the outline. It was like one of the last weekends in December. Project Apple, which again, this was a little bit of August, September to November, is 34,330 words. Again, I hit that 30,000 mark, pushed through just a bit, but really had some issues in November trying to complete that. Project Mushroom, which is my first rough draft, was 45,653 words. In my head, I see these 3 projects as very distinctly different. Did I want to write 3 projects this year? I don't think so. For 2026, rather than putting pressure on myself to finish a book this year or finish a version of a draft, I think I'm going to view these as seasons of writing. Project Inquisitor, to me, is a very dark, cold, kind of dreary book. So I see that as writing that in the winter months. So probably like December to maybe March is where I can kind of see that happening. And then as we make way into spring and summer, that is when I see Project Mushroom kind of really blossoming. And so I can see myself working on that in that spring, summer time period. Rounding out 2026 with the fall, I see Project Apple coming around again. That is where I see my writing going. And then rounding it out for the winter would be Project Inquisitor. I'll see if I stick to this. It makes the most sense in my head to keep it in that cycle. It does mean that potentially in 2026, I won't have a finished, polished draft to go query with, because ultimately that is the goal, to query. But I'm not super worried about that quite yet. I think I'm, as much as I am a mood reader, I'm finding that I'm a mood writer. And so the season has to be right in order for me to write this book. And if that means my seasons of writing change with the project I'm writing, I think I'm okay with that for now as a practice. I'm kind of letting myself have some flexibility with this rather than just trying to really focus in and kind of hit a wall potentially like I did with Project Apple when very clearly it was not coming easily. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes, but I hope everyone enjoyed my 2025 writing Wrapped. I watch other author tubers do this and I think it was so much fun, so I wanted to kind of share my own. And thank you for almost 1 year on YouTube. It's crazy to think that I started this a little while ago. I wanted to make friends in the writing community, and this has grown into something that like I'm really enjoying and enjoying like seeing other people write and their progress. But yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for a great almost year of making content, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.